Hey gang, welcome back to Firechild Video Blender Tutorials. My name is Chad, and damn is it good to be back. It's been a long time, and we've gotten a lot of requests for different tutorials. We're working on trying to get some of those made, but one of the biggest requests we got was from an old tutorial for a gold ring material, and that old tutorial was made in 2.54, I think. And the problem with making tutorials for Blender is that unlike every other piece of software out there, 3D software out there, Blender is constantly evolving. It's becoming something new every time. So tutorial makers, sometimes we don't know what's going to change, and old tutorials could very quickly become obsolete. And that's what happened with the gold ring tutorial. So I'm back to update that, but I don't believe in straight updates. I like to give you guys something a little extra. So as you see on your screen, we are going to be making not that ring. We at Firechild Video firmly believe that there is only one return, and it's not of the king. So it is what it is. We're not going to be making your precious. You'll have to make your precious on your own, but it'll be okay because all you got to do is change a certain font that we're going to be using into your precious elven font, and then you'll have your ring. Let's not waste any more time because this is probably the 5th time I've recorded this. So here we are in a default Blender scene. I'm just going to rush through some of this really quick. Delete the default lamp. I'm going to use the default cube actually. I'm going to scale it in on the y-axis. I'm not going to explain too much of how I do this because it's not the focus of this tutorial, and in one of my previous recordings, I think I spent 25 minutes just setting the scene up and describing everything. So this time I'm just going to run through it. If there's enough interest in more of the specifics of how I set the scene up, maybe I'll do a follow-up tutorial on that. But for now, just going to quick and dirty get this done. Why am I using this kind of a weird, I guess, set for the ring to sit on? Because I'm the artist that made it, and I figured, why not? Okay, so I'm going to set the camera up and give it a focal length of 80 and move it into position. Somewhere like that. Something like that, and shrink this guy up. That should, okay, that's fine. All right, now I'm going to add my lights. Real quick, 3-point, quick and dirty 3-point lighting. Yeah, this part can take a while to set up, and there's, oops, not what I meant to do. Plane, rotate Y on the 90, rotate Z, oops, rotate Z on the 90, right, bring it over here. Just setting up some quick lighting. Duplicate that. Alright, quick 3-point lighting, and we will set up a backdrop way in the back here. Scale it up. And that's our quick basic setup. I'm also going to go ahead and make our ring real quick. If you want to know, because I'm not really going to describe it here because this is just setup. If you want to get into more specifics on how I modeled this ring, head on over. I'll pop an annotation up on the screen right 3, 2, 1 now. And you can head over to the previous tutorial, watch the modeling portion, and then when it gets to the materials and textures, you can come back over here and we can continue from there because I just want to get this set up very, very quickly. There we go. And there's a ring. Now we can smooth shade it, move it into position. And it's way too big, so we'll scale it down to ring size. And there we go. And here. Okay, so our scene is pretty much set up. So that is actually looking pretty good. So actually, that ring might be a little bit thick. So let's go into the ring, and we'll select There's a few loop cuts here on the inside, and scale it out a little bit. There, that looks better. Okay, so now that we're all set up, I hopefully haven't wasted but about 5 minutes of your time. Now we can get into the update for the tutorial. So let's go ahead and switch into cycles render, because that's what we're using, and set up a couple things here in cycles. I want a transparent background, OpenGL, change my alpha from sky to transparent. And under sampling, we can go ahead and give the preview about 150. Render, we want to go about 1500. Actually, 1000 will probably do for this. Tweak that later. Okay, so if we, I don't know, set this, actually, one more thing. You probably, if you have a CUDA card, do that. Now I'm using my backup editor. If you hear any pops in the audio or things start to get slow, it's because I'm using my backup workstation. My primary had a video card fry on it, so it needs some updates, and so I'm using a backup. And we'll get through it, though. I didn't want to wait any longer to get you guys some material, because this has come really highly requested. So here we are. This is our scene set up. If we go into rendered view, you'll see we haven't given any materials to anything. We're getting a little grayish lighting is because our world settings had light on it. But we haven't set up our lights. We haven't set up squat. So let's get our lighting out of the way. That is really, really simple. Just bring this up some, scale it. Okay, so we'll give our lights, we'll call this reflection light. So this light is just to add a little reflection onto the gold material when we make it. Give it an emission of about 4. I'm going to split the view here and set this one up as my rendered view so we can see that's what that lighting's doing. This will be our fill light. And give that an emission as well. Okay, and we'll make that about 7 and give it a bluish hue. Something about like that. And then we'll give this one as our key light. Make it an emission. And we'll give it kind of a warm color. Set that to about 7 as well. That might be way too much. We'll actually scale these lights down. Yeah, see, scale them down. See, there's 2 ways you can adjust the brightness of your lights. I want the warm light to be a little brighter. Like so. Okay, so that's set up. We have no background, no textures of any kind, so let's get started texturing. One thing we can texture first is we can texture our backdrop. So we'll add a new material, say backdrop, and if we open up here, we don't need the timeline because we're not doing animation, so we'll change that to our node editor. And what I'm going to use, I'm also going to add some HDR lighting a little bit later on. That's just to add to the reflections on the metal. But we can use that HDR map that I'm going to go into our image editor. Image, open image. And I've got churchharvestlobby.hdr. Now that is something I just Googled free HDR images. And this is one of the free ones that downloaded. You can get the same thing. Just go to Google, search free HDR. You'll find it with no problem. It'll be on the first page somewhere. So with the backdrop selected, we'll tab to go into edit mode. And we'll hit U to unwrap. Since it's just a plane, it'll unwrap just fine. And now if we set this to rendered, we see nothing. And that's because we haven't applied that texture to our material. So we'll go Shift A, shader, Shift A, texture, image texture, and instead of clicking open and navigating, we can just click this little guy right here on the left of it and select what we've already loaded in, drop the color into our diffuse, and now you'll see we've got it in the background. But what we want to do is we want to create, see how there's all these lights, sunlight and all the windows and all these lights. We want those to kind of be it's not going to be perfect because I'm not creating a black and white image to go by, but this will get the job done. It's just a background image. What we want to do is we want to have actual light emitting from these bright points in our image. So we can do that by adding an emission shader and then mixing that with a mix shader here. And if we connect those two, you'll see it just goes wonky. What we need to do is we need to use this image texture as the factor in our mix shader. And now you'll see, if we maybe switch these, I think. No, that gives us a negative effect. Okay, so we'll bump this up to about 4, make them really bright. And that'll also give us a little bit of rim light, because remember, these are now emitting light onto our scene. So that's actually kind of cool. And we'll give this kind of a warmer color and darken up the other stuff a little bit. And now if we grab our plane, we can kind of position where we wanted it. And I know they're seeing a lot of detail in that background. It looks a little funky, but once we set up our camera further, it'll make a lot more sense. We don't need too much. And I know some of you are wondering why I don't just set up, because I'm about to set up HDR lighting in the World tab. And with the HDR lighting, if I leave transparent here unchecked, you would see this in the background. You would see the HDR coming through. And the reason we're not using that, I'll explain in a little bit, because once we get into the compositor, you're going to want a transparent background. So that's why I'm doing that. Okay, so in our World tab, we can click right here on the circle next to color, this time add an environment texture, and just select that same thing. So now we've got, set this to about 0.25, because we just want to use it for reflections on the metal. And there we have it. So, okay, that's done. Let me save that. FCV ring tutorial. Always save. Always save. Okay. All right, image is saved. Let's go ahead and do that kind of surrealistic concrete that I had on this. Now, UV unwrapping this could be a little complicated. However, this is a still image. The only parts of this entire thing that we're going to see is just this little guy right here. So we don't have to worry about bad seams or bad unwrapping down in this bottom half or where it curves around here. We don't have to worry about any of that. We can unwrap this very easily by just B for box select and just select this top half. That's all we need, is just that top half. We can actually probably get all of that top half. So we just select that top half, hit control, no, we don't need to do that. Hit U and unwrap. And that's it. It looks ugly, but you'll notice that when we apply our texture, which we'll do right now, we'll go to Image, Open Image, and from cgtextures.com, I got this Concrete Bear 244, and that's what we'll be using. Find that on cgtextures.com. So tab and edit mode, we've got it set up there. Now, if we go in here and go to rendered, we won't see anything, and that's because, hang on one second. That's because we haven't applied a material to it yet. So we'll go in here and we'll change this and call it, I don't know, concrete. Maybe. Come on, Blender. Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. Backup is, it's a backup editor for a reason. Okay, so we've got our diffuse here. We're going to add in texture, image texture, and we'll load in that concrete, and we drop it into the color on our diffuse. You'll see no seams. Now, if I were to zoom out and go around this thing, you can see some pretty nasty seams and stretching, texture stretching and whatnot. And this is good for what we need it for. So I'm going to leave it at that. However, I am going to add a little bit of glossiness. So we'll add a glossy shader, and we'll add a mix shader in here. We'll mix our glossy and our diffuse. Creates kind of an interesting look, and we might even drop our image into the factor. Yeah, there we go. And lastly, we need to add a little bit of displacement. So I'm actually going to just duplicate this image texture, make it easier to work with over here. We'll add in a converter, RGB to black and white, because we want to work with a black and white image. And then we'll add in a math node, change it to multiply. Oop, not divide, change it to multiply. Drop the value into either one of these values. And then drop this value into displacement, and you're going to see way too much displacement. So we'll actually set this to a real low number negative 0.02, I think, might be good. And that might be, maybe negative 0.005. We don't want a lot. We want it to have a little bit, but not a whole lot. So see, that looks pretty good. Maybe negative 0.007. A little bit more. Yeah, somewhere in there will look pretty good once we get going. So there's our background. There's everything set up. Last thing we can do is set up our camera, which is already in position. But what we want to do is we want to set up, we're going for kind of a macro effect. Any photographers out there know what I'm talking about. We're going to do some macro photography, which is going to have a very, very, very shallow depth of field, meaning we're going to have one little sliver that's in focus, and then the foreground and the background completely out of focus, and that'll add kind of a cool little effect. So in Blender, we can do that real easy by going into our camera tab right here, and under display, click limits, and that'll bring up, I don't know if you saw it, that'll bring up this little crosshair that showed up. Turn limits off, you can see. And that little crosshair, wherever we put that, is where our focus is going to be. And so we can set that by scrolling down here in the camera settings and increasing the distance. And if we zoom in, we want to put those crosshairs right on the front edge of the ring. So that way, this front edge right here is going to be in focus, where we'll have some text, we'll have some glow going on. But by the time it gets to this back, we're going to start losing focus. So this will be just out of focus, and I think it'll give us a really cool effect. So if we change our aperture, you can use radius. I prefer f-stop because I am a photographer. So that just makes it easier for me to understand. And we'll drop this down to a real low f-stop, like 1.4. Something like that. So now, after setting that up, if we go back to rendered view, you'll see a real shallow depth of field. See, the background is all blurred out now. Even the foreground right here on this rocky, concretey, whatever. Why did I use that? Because I thought it looked cool. That's all. I made it. I thought it looked cool. The end. So anyway, now as we get to the back of the ring, you'll see it's nice and blurred, but right here on the front, we're nice and in focus. Exactly what we were looking for. So that's set up. All we got now is to just do our gold ring. So hopefully we're about 17 minutes. Everything's set up. Go to our gold ring. We'll hit new, and we'll call it gold ring. And in the node editor, I prefer to do all my work here in the node editor as opposed to in this panel. This just gets too confusing as you go, and this is much easier to see. Don't need diffuse. What we need is Shift A, shader. Take a wild guess. Doing a reflective metal tutorial. That's right, glossy. And now we can just kind of leave this rendering while we work. Hopefully it won't slow things down too much. And if we connect our glossy, you'll see, there you go. We've got a nice silver-ish material, which looks pretty good. But we need to add gold. And I went looking around for gold coloring because the coloring is the important part. Gold is, any metallic materials are actually incredibly complex to make realistic. And funny, I'm glad I mentioned this because I do want to offer a little disclaimer. The way I'm doing the gold is not the only way to make gold in Blender. Like I said, gold, silver, all these metallic reflective materials, especially metallics, can get very, very, very complicated because you have a foreground color, a midground, and then a background color. You have all these different colors mixing together to make a convincing gold. And to illustrate that, if you go to blendswap.com and you search for Cycles gold material, some people there have uploaded just some absolutely amazing gold materials, incredibly complicated node setups, and I'm not gonna do that. For one, other people have already done them. I trying to improve on their work would be impossible, and I don't want to just rip their work off and claim it as my own. So I'm doing my own simpler version that gets the job done, looks impressive, and won't cause too many problems. But like I said, you want some really, really good photorealistic, if you're compositing gold objects into real life live footage, then you might want to get more complicated with your gold. Just throwing that out there, that ours is not going to be as simple as a glossy shader with a color, but it's not going to be as complicated as some of the others. Okay, I am rambling. I'm going to shut up. For our color, we want to go into the color, and I actually went into the internet and went to Wikipedia, and I looked up metallic gold, and it gave us a hex triplet code of D4AF37. So that's what we're going to use. You can pick whatever color you think looks good for your gold, but I am going to go in D4AF37. And that's what we're going to use for our gold. Now, it doesn't look quite right yet, but bear with me. Actually, I need to pause this for 1 second. All right, so there it is. It's gold, but not great. So what we can do is actually, to illustrate, what we need to do is when you're looking at this gold, you'll have a certain color coming through right at the facing, but then as you go off towards the edges of the gold will get it'll change color a little bit. So what we want to do is we kind of emulate that inside of Blender. So I'm actually just decreasing the roughness a little bit so it's a little more reflective here. Get a little more of those elements coming through. And of the world tab, may kick this up to 0.5. Just so our reflections are coming through nice. Okay, so what we want to do is Shift D. You guys don't need to do this part right here. This is just for my personal reference. So we've got this glossy. I'm going to Shift D, create a second one. And we want to kind of give it that foreground, background dissolve, that transition from what's directly facing the camera to as it goes off towards the edges. Quickest way to do that. And Shift A, we'll add in a mix shader. Drop that in. And we'll connect these two. You won't see any change because they're the exact same color. But if I go in here and I make this some really different colors, you'll see the factor will allow us to go from one to the other, but it just gives them kind of a general blend. What we want to do is we want it to have one color directly facing you, trail off to another on the edges. To do that, we'll add in an input, layer weight, and you'll see on layer weight we've got Fresnel and facing. If we connect facing to the factor, now you'll see we've got this one color, but right on the edges you'll see that red is coming through. And you can adjust that, get it, go the other way, bring a little bit more in. So now we've got those two different colors. So now, that actually looks pretty cool in and of itself, even with that color scheme. I kind of dig that. Now if we, oops, I swear, you use backup workstations and nothing works properly. If we delete those and then bring this guy back in with our original gold color, come on, drop that into the top, or maybe actually the bottom, or nothing at all. Come on. I'm sorry about that, guys. This is kind of aggravating. And then we change this color to a little bit lighter color right in there. Actually, that looks pretty good. So now you'll see we've got a much more impressive than we had right at the beginning. So there's our gold. It's going to have to get a lot more than 150 samples to get rid of some of this noise and make it a little more impressive. But that is the basics. You know what? I might actually bring this camera up just a little bit and tilt it down. Yeah, I like that view better. Okay. So we'll just take these, box select, take these nodes, drag them up here, because that's our gold. Our gold is now done. Now what we need to do is to put our text in. If you wanted just a gold ring, there it is. You can stop watching now. You've got your gold on your way. You make it as, by adjusting these roughness values, you can make it as reflective and shiny as you want. I actually prefer the edges to be a little more reflective. There we go, something like that. Okay, so there's our gold ring. Looking good. Next we need to add in that text on our ring. So to add in that text, what we need to do is we need to create some text first of all. Now I went in and I've already created some text. Image, open image. I created, where are you? FCV ring text. I created this, Firechild video tutorials. I created this in Microsoft Paint. Now you can use GIMP, you can use Photoshop, but I created it in Paint just to show that it's possible to do in Microsoft Paint. All you need is text, black text on a white background, and you're good to go. I use Bickham Script Pro for the font, and that's what I had. One little tip if you do use Paint is to go in, zoom out a little bit where you can grab the edge of your canvas And if you watch this bottom right corner, you'll see that it makes the canvas larger or smaller so you can have a larger canvas. Important to do if you're doing this in Paint. In Photoshop GIMP, it's a little different, but point being, black text, white background, that's all you need. And you're good to go. So there we are with that. Now, to get this onto the ring, we are going to have to UV unwrap the ring. But we don't have to put all our seams. See, I'm big on saving time where time can be saved. And with this UV unwrapping, instead of properly unwrapping the entire ring to where it's correctly UV unwrapped, it's a lot easier just to UV unwrap the sections we need. So I'm just going to grab a seam over here on the side. Remember, our camera's down over here, and we'll grab one on the side by holding Alt, right-clicking, and then it'll select that loop. Hit Control E and mark seam. Then if we hit Control Tab, we can change our select mode. We'll change it to face. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to Alt, right-click, and select the front of our ring. Now, if I UV unwrap that, you'll see we've got a straight bar. And then we also want to put text on the inside. So if we Alt, right-click, hold down Shift, and select the inside faces, U to unwrap, we'll have our inside. So here's our inside and our outside. Now if we select the whole ring, you'll see we've got our inside and our outside, so that's good. Position it right where our text is. If you hit L on your keyboard, that'll select all your connected faces wherever your cursor was. We can scale this up, position our text, and if we go into rendered view, you'll see nothing, again, has happened because we have not applied that image texture to our material. So back in our material, texture, image texture, and then from this little drop down guy, we can select our text. And what we want to do is first create it as kind of an engraving. We'll worry about adding the light later. Engraving is real simple. Shift A, converter, math. Change that math node to multiply, just like we did with this concrete floor. Drop the color into one of those two, and then connect the displacement. And you'll see it's there, but there's a problem. First of all, grab it on the X. We can move it around, position it a little better, but problem is it's upside down. And so if we rotate and bring this like so, now you'll see we're right side up. Oop. Well, let's rotate and pull down Control, it'll snap. There we go. So now we can position it back where we want it on the ring. Slide it over. And we may scale this on the X. Make it a little smaller. Make the text a little smaller. And grab X. And reposition it. It's just about moving your UV map around until you get it positioned right where you want it. So we want to be able to see Firechild. So there we go. And probably scale up on the Y. Just like so. So there you have it. And now we've got an engraving, but it's way too much. We can drop this down. -0.05. And that's not bad. It's pretty good. So there's our engraving. We can do the same thing. You'll see, do the same thing for the inside. And again, we'll have to rotate this. Oh. Zoom out, rotate. And we'll flip it over to where it's facing the right way. And you'll see it's on the inside a little bit right there. So now we can just position our UVs. Scale on the X. maybe not. There it is. So now we've got it coming through in the background right like we want it. Scale it on the X a little more. Bring it across. And it's out of focus. You can't read it, but that's okay because we don't want to. We want to be able to read it on the foreground. So there. Now you can stop watching if all you wanted to do was engrave something, because that's the basics. Now there's a lot more you can do for your engraving, but that's just the bare bones on setting up engraving. So let's tab and go back into rendered. And we don't need this window well, we'll leave it there for now. Okay, so now we need to make it glow. So how do we make it glow? Well, if you remember this group right here, which I probably could group if I wanted to, this is our gold. So it's like just our gold. Move it up some. That's our gold material. This is our engraving. And now what we need to do is we need to mix in our glow with our gold. So obviously mixing, Shift D will create another mix node, drop it in right there. And then if we add an emission shader and drop that into our mix, you'll see really funky things going on. And that's because we need to tell Blender that we only want to emit light where that text is, and the rest of it we want gold. So we want to mix those two like that. So the way we can do that is by using our image texture for Firechild video tutorials here. And if we drop that in to the factor on this mix shader, you'll see that now we've got our gold where the letters are and everything else is emitting light. So it's backwards. So fix that. We'll just switch these nodes around. And there you go. The last thing to do is just setting up the color. We'll give it kind of an orangish and make it pretty dark. And boost up the strength, about 25 maybe. To where now we got some light reflecting down here. And there you go, guys. That's it. It's set up. There is your ring. Your precious, if you use the correct font. We can take this a step further. What we can do is I want to take this into the compositor after we render, and I want to be able to darken and tweak the colors of the world without messing with the ring. And then I want to be able to add a little bit of a glare to the ring without adding a glare to the whole world. So what we need to do is we need to create some render layers. Real easy to do. So what we'll do is, since our ring's selected, we'll hit M and we'll move it to layer 2. And then we'll take our lights and we'll move. We're going to have them in layer 1 and 2. So we'll hold down Shift, click layer 2, and now our lights are in both layers. So if we go to our different layers, this layer has our camera, our ring, and our lights. And this one has our scene and our lights. So now they're separated. So if we go into our render layer, we can take this first one and we can just call it world. And then hit the plus sign here, creates another render layer. We'll call that one ring. So one more thing you have to set up. In the world tab, you want just layer 1 because that's where all our world is. And then for the ring tab, you want just layer 2 because that's where our ring is. Then, before we render, one thing you have to remember to do is to shift and select to where both of them are selected. So now we've got scene 1 and 2, everything selected. And now when we render, it'll render them out as separate render layers that we can use in the compositor, which I'll go ahead and set up now. Keep that at 50% for the tutorial. Render samples at 1,000. Okay, I'm going to hit render, and this might take just a little while because my backup machine, the video card I've got in here, is terrible. So I'm going to pause the recording. We'll come back and finish this up. All right, we're back, and you'll see things look a little weird. See, you've got your background, your world settings, and the reflection of our ring, but no ring. And that's because we separated the render layers. But this render layer still recognizes that that's where the ring sits. So you've still got your glow from the text, you've got the ring, all of that. So let's go into node editor here. We don't need this window anymore. And we can select our compositor. Click Use Nodes and Backdrop, sorry. And now we can combine our two render layers by taking this render layer, hit Shift D, duplicate it, and change this one to ring. And you'll see we have our ring all by itself with an alpha background, and we've got our world all by itself. So to combine the two, real easy, Shift A, and this is where adding that alpha, remember in the render tabs, when we change this to transparent and set the alpha to transparent, the reason we did that, instead of using the HDR in the World tab, instead of using this loaded HDR as our background, was because if we would have done that, it would have shown up in this render and we wouldn't have been able to overlay our ring back on top of our scene. So that's the reason why we added that plane for the backdrop. So hope that makes sense now. And we can go to color and alpha over. And then we drop that, and we'll drop this render layer into the other. And there you have it. It's overlaid. And now what we can do, the cool part about doing it like this, which you could have stopped the tutorial right before we did that render, but this enables you, I just wanted to show you this is kind of cool. You can add in, say, a color balance to the world, and then you can darken up the shadows, or bring out the highlights a little more, and maybe give the shadows kind of a bluish hue, and give the highlights a little bit of a warmer hue, and darken the overall midtones a lot, maybe not too much. That might be too much. Bring back our highlights, kind of tweak with that a little bit. And then add to that a little contrast curve. Shift A, color RGB curves. And we'll just give it a little contrasty curve in there. So now you can see we did all of that without affecting the coloring or the lighting of our ring, which is very cool, because then we can go into our ring here and we can add in a filter, glare, and drop that right there. And it's going to be a little too much. So we can increase this threshold amount. Sorry if you can hear that rumble outside. My neighbor has a pretty awesome motorcycle. I'm just a tad bit jealous. But anyway, you can add in a glare. You could probably add in a second glare with a fog glow if you were so inclined. Change that to fog glow. Drop the threshold down a little bit. Wait for it to composite here. And this is pretty cool. That fog glow adds a little glow to the text especially, and it just kind of makes the image pop a little more. And point being is, as the artist, you can have a little fun with what you're making. So that's what we've done. That's what it looks like. It's a little surrealistic, but that's cool too. It's a whole form of art all into its own. That's what we've done. Guys, that's about it. Have some fun with this. Make your one true ring. Do all kinds of things. I encourage you to experiment and try new things, and I'd love to see the work you guys do. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below. Get involved, because the more you guys are involved, the more likes, subscriptions, questions, tutorial requests, the more you guys get involved, the more it motivates me to get more tutorials out. I'm tired of waiting so long to put out new tutorials, and it's not because I haven't been receiving requests. I've gotten a ton of them, but it helps motivate me. It helps keep Firechild Video going. You guys are a part of this community, so I want you to be involved. So anyway, my voice is kind of going. This is the fourth time I've recorded this today. But I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to say thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned. We've got more stuff coming. We're launching a new web series on, it's called Movie Roasters. It'll be going pretty soon. I'll keep you guys up to date on that. When it finally launches, I'll come back in here and add an annotation right here. Bing. And that's about all I got to say. Once again, this was Firechild Video Blender Tutorials. Be sure to check us out on firechildvideo.blogspot.com for the latest and greatest. Check out our other videos. And we'll see you guys again very, very soon.